Hello, hello, hello. Right, now I am having to navigate this. Okay, okay, I do believe we are live. Um, welcome, welcome, welcome. Let me just make sure. I think everything is working okay. Okay. Welcome to the Ascension Aquarian Codes. This this whole concept came through for me about a week and a half ago. I was not planning on doing any more lives, any more masterclasses for the rest of this year, but this just came through. I was walking around our land with my dogs, and suddenly this just kind of dropped into my awareness, and I just felt that this would be a really important masterclass, like almost like a masterclass series that I could share, especially at the end of 2025. And what a year 2025 has been, and going forwards for 2026. In fact, this masterclass, I feel, will be watched 2026, 2027, 2028, because we're looking at a very, very big theme. We're actually looking at a theme that spans thousands of years. We're not even talking about a theme that's going to span next year or the end of this decade or, another century. We're literally talking about a theme that is thousands, that's going to span thousands of years. So, in this masterclass, I kind of want to share a big picture overview, but I'm going to be sharing it in quite a unique way. And to start with this, I want to talk about environment. Like, what does environment mean? How do we get impacted by our environment? And I think it was last year. It was I did a post. I did a post on social media, and it was a beautiful, beautiful blue sky, but quite snowy. And I was there with my hat and my gloves, and I did a post all about environment. And it was so interesting because I could just feel like I put this post out into the world, and I could just feel that people weren't really getting what I was talking about. They didn't quite understand what I meant by environment. And I kind of feel drawn right now to share a little bit more about environment. So, the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is literally to look at your environment right now and see whether you can just lift the frequency. Now, those of you that have been in my world for a long time may well already be doing this. Like, like have your altar, you've got your crystals, you've got your candles, you put your different symbology sort of totems on your altar. You put crystals all around your space. You put different plants, different things that remind you, that elevate your frequency. But for those of you you don't, or have not cleaned your space today, that would be the first thing I suggest before you even move into the rest of this masterclass. So if you're watching this as a replay, I suggest you press pause right now and get a candle out, light a candle, put a bit of a smudge on, a bit of incense on, maybe just clear the space a bit, because your environment is really, really important. This is a big teaching of the Empress Codes. I do a whole like a 21-day immersion into the Empress Codes inside my Star Guardians. And one of the reasons that I do that is that the Empress Codes are so important when it comes to being able to be really clear in your environment and be able to shift the frequency of your environment, because your environment matters. It has a direct impact on your frequency. It has it imprints your energy field. Now, I'm sure you've very much experienced that. For example, you go into a different space, into a different location, into a different house, into a different environment, and when you go in, you feel different. That you're picking up the energy of that environment. Now, some of you will be more impacted than others because of the way that your energy runs, because of the way that you're coded. And I always remember my daughter, she as a child, and it became really, really obvious when I watched her, like literally whenever we would go somewhere with her, she would literally enter that environment and then just stay still, and she would just observe. Like, she's going to a space and she wouldn't even take a coat off or anything, or go and greet anyone. She would just stand still and just look all around, and she could do that for at least 5-10 minutes. And what she was doing was she was literally assessing the energy of the environment. She was taking on board, what is going on here? Am I safe? Am I not safe? What's going on? How do I feel about that? Is this a space that I'm happy to be in or not be in? Because she was hyper aware of her environment. Now, this is as a very, very young child. And you may notice similarities within you and how susceptible you are to different energies and different spaces. Now, it is a blessing, but also a curse, depending on how you work with it. The blessing is that you then are because you can understand and assess and feel a space, it also means that you can regrid that space, because you know and sense what's out. You know what needs to be shifted, what needs to be changed, because you can feel it. It's like a sonar energy, right? That goes out and then it bounces back and you're like, oh, no, that doesn't feel right. I need to put this here, put that there. Feel it, test it. Does that feel any better? Oh, no, actually, I'm going to put that over there. And it's actually how I actually put my back out the other week, because literally I had to move. I had a massive, massive crystal, and I literally went, right, this needs to go somewhere else. And I decided I would move it myself. Not the smartest idea to have, but it just didn't feel right exactly where it was. It wasn't like I was moving it far. I just literally was just moving it inches, but it would get to that precision where you're just like, no, it needs to go there, no, that needs to go there. And then I sit with it, I feel it, and I'm like, yeah, that feels right. No, that doesn't feel right. So there's this feeling of how much one's environment impacts you. The curse of that is that you can get, when it's an environment that's not supportive for you, it can be very difficult to navigate different spaces that you're in if you feel the negativity. Now, I am going to share later on in this transmission ways to support you, which is to do with belonging. I'm going to and connecting into the grid. I'm going to share with you in a little bit, because it's one of the core themes of these Ascension Aquarian codes. So I do want to share that with you. So why am I talking about environment, and what has that got to do with Aquarian themes? So because our environment is so impactful on our energetic field, whether we're aware of it or not, where you put yourself, whether it's you physically or whether it's energetically, matters. It matters a ton. It matters way more than you probably think it does or realizes that it does. And what I'm sensing in the collective, because one of the themes of Aquarian codes is frequency, is that putting yourself or restructuring your environment, or where you're, like literally changing locations, if that comes to that, or is what you'll feel guided, has a tremendous impact on your energy field. So that environment can be the grid, the location that you're in. So where your home is located, or where you spend a lot of your time. It can be then the actual space that you're in, so the house you're in, the office that you're in. And it can also be energetically, like the places that you put yourself in energetically, like it could be like a type of healing that you do, or a thing that you do, and the community that's attached with that. So I'm going to explain all of that, but let's start with your grid location. So the grid where you spend the most of your time has a huge impact on you, and you will be in a specific location for a specific reason. If you feel guided to move, there will be a big reason why you feel guided to move. And you'll probably be wanting to listen to that to understand that, because your location, the grid that you're in, influences your energy. And this is one of the reasons why I work with sacred sites, because sacred sites are where there's a huge amount of energy that's available, and that energy is like Mother Earth energy, but it's way, way more than that. It's also connects dimensionally. So another way to say that with sacred sites is that sacred sites nourish you multidimensionally. So think of yourself as not just your physical body, but you also know yourself to be an emotionally, that there's an emotional aspect to you. You also know yourself to that there is a mental aspect to you, your thoughts, your the perceptions, the way you think. And you also know that there's a spiritual aspect to yourself, what you would call your spiritual sense of self. But that spiritual sense of self is multidimensional, because you are multidimensional. You do not exist just on one plane. You don't just exist on this earth matter plane that you see. You exist at a multi-dimensional level. So if you think about it, it makes absolute obvious sense that it's that to nourish the totality of yourself means to nourish your multidimensional self. And how do you do that? Like, how does one nourish your multidimensional self? Well, that means it's about plugging in to places, to environments that feed that. And to me, that's what sacred sites do. That is one of the main benefits for plugging in to sacred sites, is they literally feed your soul. They feed your spirit. They feed your multi-dimensional self. And what is happening now with this shift from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius is that one of the primary codes is all to do about frequency and frequency mastery. Like, how does one master their own frequency? How do you master your frequency? So a lot of that is around being able to shift your frequency. And your frequency, and this is what's important to understand, is that your frequency is not just your frequency to do with your perception and how you think, although that is very important. It's not just your frequency in terms of how you're feeling, although that is very important. It's also your frequency at a multi-dimensional level. So your frequency when it comes to your galactic sense of self, your frequency when it comes to your elemental sense of self, your frequency when it comes to your angelic sense of self, And so sacred sites, because they ripple out across hundreds of miles, and because these sacred sites are like stargates, that they connect into different dimensions, into different star systems, into different galactic systems. So not just within this Milky Way system, but also into intergalactic systems, into different dimensional systems, right? It's kind of mind blowing, right? It's so huge that our mental brain can't literally get hold of it. But yet, I know that as I'm speaking, you will hear the truth behind what I'm saying. It's like there's a frequency behind my words. There's a frequency behind what I'm communicating that will just resonate with you. So you don't need to understand what I'm saying. You don't need to understand what a sacred site is doing for you. There just needs to be that resonance. And again, resonancy is a huge aspect of these ascension codes. So when we're looking at the Age of Pisces, which is what we have been in for the last 2,000 years, compared to the Age of Aquarius, there is a huge shift. There is a huge difference between the two. And so the Age of Pisces was perfect for where as a collective we were, but now we're having to make a huge shift, and everything is having to recalibrate via that. So when we're looking at environment, and when I was talking about sacred sites being this huge environment through which, when you place yourself, when you plug yourself into a sacred site, whether you go there in person or whether you go there because you're connected in energetically, there is a huge imprint that happens in your energetic field. I call that like activations. You get activated with specific codes, with specific frequencies. And that is a big part of my unique journey, my unique gifts, is one, decoding, like explaining what those codes are that are unique to that location through time and space, but then also being able to connect people in to receive their own imprint of that field so that they can restructure their own energetic system. And that's why the masters would go. They would travel literally thousands and thousands of miles to literally place their physical body in grid locations. And this is something that I also do. I take people to in person to grid locations to experience that, but I also am able to do that energetically as well. So we don't have to travel in person to a specific grid location, although I do that. You can just travel energetically with me, and this is all the work that I do inside the planetary guardians. So that to me is one of the reasons why sacred sites are so important, and then they will continue to be and become more and more important for the collective, for people, because of how frequency and resonance is playing out on the planet with these Aquarian codes. Because it won't be about what you know, your knowledge. It won't be about what you say necessarily, or who you say you are. It will be about the frequency behind that. And that's why we're getting such a collapse right now, because it's not about the external appearance. It's all about the frequency behind that. So you could have somebody like have a lot of knowledge on stuff, but if they're not the embodiment of that knowledge, it's empty. And the illusions and glamours around that will, as we go more and more into the Aquarian era, will become more and more obvious, because as we shift our own frequency, we're able to discern so much more when someone is speaking truth, like an embodied truth, and when they're not. Because it's so much about authenticity, and authenticity demands integrity, and integrity demands like how can I say, it demands a coherence all the way through you energetically. So it demands a coherence between your spiritual, your mental, your emotional, and physical. It's gotta align. Gotta align up. And when you get that coherence, that is when you get the magic. That is when you get the synchronicities. That is when there is a coherence in your field, and you become magnetic to that to which you are calling in. That is the power of the magician. And so your environment matters, because wherever you place yourself in different environments impacts your energy field, which then either creates a coherence for you in your energy field, or it distorts your energy field. So there's a couple of examples that I want to share with you with this, where it was so obvious after the fact for me how much the environment was impacting me, and how it was actually holding me back into whom I was becoming. So I think it was in 2005, 2006, we moved into our brand new, beautiful home. And it was a really we built the home ourselves. It was like on 3 levels, lots of glass. It was very unusual for its time. And anyone that came to it, they always felt that when they came in, they were like transported to another dimension. They would always say that, like, oh my goodness, it feels like I'm on holiday here. I feel different. I feel so relaxed. I feel there's something very harmonious about it. And because we built this house ourselves, it meant that we did the foundations ourselves, right? We created the foundations. And one of the things I felt very, very guided to do at that time was to create a grid in those foundations. So as they were pouring in the cement, I felt I basically I had some really beautiful, massive, massive big crystals that I placed into the very foundation. So they poured the cement, and then I went along when they were pouring the cement. The groundworks were there. They were fascinated by what I did. They probably thought it was a little bit cuckoo, but they just loved it. They thought it was very different. They loved it, and they actually helped me because some of the places because I'm quite small, I couldn't actually reach to put the crystals in, and they actually placed some of those crystals for me, which was so kind of them to do that because I think concrete takes about 24 hours to settle. So I literally had to do it there and then. And so what I was doing is I was creating a grid. So literally, my house was gridded with crystals in the foundation. And it created a hologram. Now, at the time, I didn't realize that the grid created a hologram, but that's what grids do. Crystal grids, there's an energy to it, and they create holograms. And that's literally when you go on a sacred site, that is literally what's happening. You're stepping into a hologram. Whether you're aware of it or not, you need specific technology that's running through you. Again, technology, whether it's spiritual technology or like physical technology, is very, very much an Aquarian code. And holograms, grids are one of the technologies that I understand and that I work with in different ways. I will explain that as we go on. But just know that when you step into a sacred site, literally what you're doing is stepping into hologram. That's what I read. That's how I understand what's going on, because I'm reading the hologram through my own spiritual technology that's switched on in a certain way that enables me to read the hologram and then transmit to others what's going on in that hologram. So when I was created that grid, I had an intention around that, and I created the grid. And it served me so beautifully. It was like magic, this grid. And it was actually, because I also had the geomancers out, and actually there was oh my goodness, I can't remember how many ley lines, but there was a few ley lines that actually connected at this location, and it created a Star of David, which works very much with Merkaba and light bodies. So I'd got this energetic ley line or ley lines crossing that were creating a Merkaba, creating a Star of David, which is effectively a Merkaba, which is like a vehicle of light, through which I'd placed a grid on there. So that amplified everything. So it was like people were coming into that space, and it was like I'd created a living Merkaba to a certain extent, but it was gridded in a very certain way, and gridded to support me and my work. And it was amazing. it was amazing until it wasn't amazing. And this is kind of, again, what I want to say about environments and about outgrowing one's environment. So what happened was in, I think it was in 2015, and actually a little bit before, we kind of wanted our own, like a larger piece of land, and wanted to be able to kind of be off grid, like, so have our own water, our own electricity, and just have a bigger space around us, and have that space so that we could share that space with others, in terms of me being able to have workshops, people coming onto that new grid location, and having the benefit of experiencing this new grid. And in 2015, I found this piece of land, or you could say it found us. And we did a huge leap of faith, because in England, you can't just build anywhere, and you certainly can't build in open countryside, which is where this was. And it's incredibly rare to be able to do that. But I just knew we had to buy this piece of land. There was no planning permission on it or anything like that. It was an open countryside, but it just felt right. So I deeply trusted myself, and we just went for it. And we bought it. And actually, interestingly, at the same time, we bought an absolute derelict place in the south of France, in a very, very specific place that we fell in love with. We got married there. And it was about the same time that we bought this, like the lappy place. No one had lived in it for 50 years, and the whole thing needed redoing top to bottom. So here we were, we bought these two kind of places. Both of them you couldn't live in or anything like that. We didn't know, we hadn't really got the means to do them up or anything, but we just deeply trusted ourselves, our intuition, and went for it, and just thought, well, we're going to take that next step. That is the next step, even if we don't know what the how is, or how we're going to draw in the funds to move forward. That's what we're doing. And so it got to a point where we knew we were ready, and what would happen, we'd on this site in the UK, in England, James, my husband, there was there's a couple of derelict buildings on it, and so we redid the derelict building, and we were able to live in that. And we were trying to sell our house, but it just was not selling. And so I just said, look, you know what, babes, I actually think we just need to move, and then things will unfold. So we did. We moved, I think it was around Christmas 2022, I want to say, maybe 2021, I'm not sure, can't quite remember, into our little hut, all off grid. But we couldn't move forwards until we sold the house. But we were really struggling with selling the house. The house was not just selling. What was happening is that people were putting offers, but every time the offer went in, at some point it would just fall through. And this kept on happening over and over and over again. And I was just like, there's got to be something here that I'm missing. Like, what is going on that I'm not understanding as to why it keeps on falling through? And then one day, it suddenly came through. It was the grid. It was the crystal grid that I had laid in the foundation, that was creating a hologram, and that hologram was created by me with my intentions. And so even though people were saying they wanted to move in, wanted to live there, it was never actually finalizing because it was literally impossible for anybody to actually fully live there whilst that grid was still there, whilst that grid was still active. And the minute I understood that was the minute I understood the power of grids, the power of the hologram. And do you know how long it took me to then shift that? About 10 minutes. Literally, took 10 minutes. All I needed to do was neutralize that grid. And the minute I did that, miracles started to unfold. And we sold our house a few months later. And that was a huge, huge learning curve for me, to do with holograms, to do with grids, and to do with one's environment. So what was happening was that grid was still active, and I was still connected in to that grid. And because I was still connected into that grid, there was a part of me that then couldn't move forward. So not only could I not move forward, but that whole environment and the house and the land could not move forward with bringing in new people, because there was a mismatch in the frequency. So I had to neutralize the grid, literally just through my intent, and then disconnect. Because although I had disconnected myself from the house, and because I'd been doing all of this work beforehand, but it just wasn't holding, and what I couldn't understand, I'm cutting my cords, I'm doing all this disconnection work, why is it still connected? And that was because the hologram, that old hologram through the grid, was still alive. And this is a lot of the work that I do with people, especially in my Ascension Vortex program container, is because at one level you could do all the energy work, but it's the actual hologram where the actual real shifts and the permanent shifts occur. And this is what's happening over this decade, is that we are literally, and this is happening to the collective, shifting our hologram. And this is why it's so destabilizing. This is why you can feel like you're going through such a collapse. You can feel so vulnerable. You don't know where you belong anymore. You don't know who you are anymore. You feel like you're kind of ship out in the middle of the ocean. You can't see any land anywhere. You have no anchor. You feel you're just being buffeted from here, there, everywhere. Because as a collective, we are shifting holograms. And what are we shifting? What hologram are we shifting? We're shifting into our divinity. We are shifting into the divine blueprint, the divine hologram. And so there is a huge amount of internal shifting of frequency that goes on within that, as well as activating dormant codes within us, especially at a multidimensional level, that then kind of activates and crystallizes our own divine hologram, so that we can sustain ourselves in this new hologram. So another way to say that is that New Earth and the divine matrix is birthed through each one of us. Can't expect anyone else to do that for you anymore. That was the Piscean age. That was the age of the gurus. That was the age where we gave our power over to something or somebody else, to an institution, whatever thing or combinations of things, in return for a sense of belonging, for a sense of feeling safe, and for a sense of empowerment. But trust me, that empowerment was borrowed. And now we come into this age of Aquarius with these codes, these Aquarian codes all around sovereignty, all around frequency, all around igniting your uniqueness, right? So there's a whole huge shift. So once I had neutralized that grid, shut down that hologram, that enabled me to then fully move into energetically the new and start to build our new foundations, to start to build the foundations of our new home. Because we need the finances of selling the old place to be able to begin the new. But that wasn't available until I had neutralized and shut down that grid, which enables me to move on myself. So what was playing out in the physical was obviously playing out energetically for me. And then everything that was connected to that house and to that grid and hologram, everything that had been connected into that, also, if it was not in alignment to whom I was coming, also started to collapse. Bit by bit, started to collapse. Because it was not in alignment to my empowerment process and to my next step. And if you look back over the last few years, you will come to see and start to understand how whatever has played out for you will be in part to support you to become more sovereign, to support you to become more empowered. And you might not see that right now, depending on where you are in your own cycle. But trust me, as you come out the other side, as you look back, you will see and come to have those realizations for yourself. And as you see it through that lens, it then empowers you even more. It supports you to move forwards even more, because your power, your uniqueness, your impact, your purpose will be directly related to that. And so, as I made that internal shift within myself by shifting literally the hologram, or should I say, releasing that one hologram to release myself, I was then in this sort of liminal space whilst building the new. And that is what I feel where a lot of us are at. and then moving forwards, depending on when you're listening to this video, whether it's 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, you'll be building these new foundations, but these new foundations will be coded in your sovereignty. They'll be coded in your uniqueness. They'll be coded in your inner power, in your inner truth, and in your inner authority. Because those are the Aquarian codes. And you're going to start to see, if you're not already seeing it, that there's like a splitting happening where for some it gets more and more effortless because they're riding these Aquarian codes. They're riding that wave. And for others, it's getting more and more difficult because they're trying to do things in the old way. They're trying to do things in the Piscean way. So what are the Piscean ways? The Piscean ways is like through martyrdom, through sacrifice, through having to give up something, through having to struggle, through having to push, through giving your power over to something, through working the way you run, the way you think, the way you run your energy, so the way you think, the way you feel, through a hierarchical system of top down. It's like if you're running in those old codes, as in that's the way you're thinking, that's your perception on things, that's the actions that you're taking, the behaviors that what you're doing. If it's running with that old coding underneath, it will get harder and harder and harder until you make the shift, until you shift your hologram, right? And so the Aquarian codes is all about the quantum. The Aquarian codes is all about technology, about the light body, about Merkaba. It's all about moving at lightning frequency. But it's also all about you being unique and in truth with you. So I want to just share two more things around this before we complete for this transmission. And the first thing to say is, again, to do with your environment. And so, yes, you have the environment of your grid location, of your house. You also have the environment of the communities you place yourself in, the systems and the institutions that you place yourself in. But there is also an even wider environment, and that's a cosmological, astrological environment. And this is that shift of Piscean energy to Aquarian energy. So before, those Piscean energies, they served us because that was the environment that we were in, right? It was just everywhere. You couldn't escape it. If you were on this planet, you were in the Piscean age. And so you were in those Piscean energies. And so depending on how you navigate that is how whether you flourished inside of that or not. But those Piscean energies are dissipating very, very rapidly. And it's those Aquarian frequencies that are now coming in. And that's why we're getting that collapse, because the old way of doing things, the old ways of thinking, the old ways of operating, like literally our operating system is changing. It's changing. And so it's learning how to operate in a different way. And so by placing yourself, because it is all Aquarian energy now, by placing yourself in environments, whether it's physical environments or energetic environments that support you, because they give you those imprints, those Aquarian energy imprints, is what is going to sustain you and support you to flourish, to grow, to expand, to be the highest possible version of you. And so the more you can do that, the more nourishing you're going to find it to your sense of self and to your soul. And the more it's going to support you to expand. So that's the kind of the major transmission that I wanted to share with you right now. But there is one more thing that I do want to share, and this is all to do about a state of belonging. So the thing with the Aquarian codes is that a big aspect of these Aquarian codes is all to do about innovation and uniqueness. And so that includes us as well. So that includes being original, being in that state of uniqueness, claiming your own uniqueness, honoring your own uniqueness, which means being aware of your own uniqueness. And there's a lot around that in and of itself, because a lot of that uniqueness taps into your galactic sense of self as well as it could be angelic, it could be inner earth, like elemental, and it's a connection of all of that together. That's all delegated via your oversoul chakra. So there's a lot of spiritual technology involved around that. But this is where we're moving towards now. This is something that I have been working with for the last year and a half. And it's to do with the sense of belonging and where do I belong. So in the past, what many of us have done, and this is very much the Age of Pisces, is that to get a sense of belonging, we will have looked for groups, for communities that we had a shared identity with. And so that's what created our connection, was through shared identity. But as we move into the Age of Aquarius, and your identity and who you are becomes more and more unique, where do we get our belonging from? Like, how do we connect into communities if it's not through a shared sense of identity? Because the more unique you become, which is connected to the more you identify as being unique, right? Where's your group? Where is your group? Right? And where do you gain your sense of connection? Does that mean that there's going to be no more communities? No, doesn't mean that. So the way as we move forward, communities are going to be, well, those communities that are really going to flourish and be supportive and nourishing is where you're going to, it's like networked, and it's like the network runs horizontal as opposed to vertical. So it's not a power down structure. It's network. Now I've done a whole masterclass on this to do with Aquarian wealth themes, right? Because this is again how the wealth codes going forwards are going to be working more and more and more. So the way I see it is that we have communities, but it's like each person is connected to their own sense of uniqueness and their own sense of belonging. It's like you belong to you first, which means you feel comfortable in your own skin. You feel at one with your sense of self and who you are. And through that, you can come into a community not to feel so that you can belong because you don't feel like you belong. No, you're coming in with your belongingness intact and coming into a community where you connect into that community with your own sense of who you are, with your own uniqueness, and you ripple out that within the community. So the community is connected through resonance and not identity. So you could have in one community like all these different eclectic beings, people, but they're all coming together in this beautiful, coherent energy because each one values their own uniqueness. So there is no like competition or feeling like, how can you feel triggered by somebody else in terms of a power dynamic when you own your uniqueness? There is no competition. Like, that's impossible, right? Because you're so unique. But you have to first understand that and connect to that and own that, which again is a lot of the work that I do inside my containers, is to support people to do that, especially in Ascension Vortex, but also through the grid work that I do with the Earth Star Guardians. Because by going to different sacred sites, again, you are immersing yourself in these different holograms, which activate your codes within you to activate you and your uniqueness more and more and more. And so one of the things that I recognized for myself was that with that belonging for me, and this may be the case for you, is that my belonging was to do with a much deeper connection into the grid. So not just the earth. It was not like I just belonged to Mother Earth, but I also belonged to the stars and to the planets. It's like I am a part of them and they are a part of me. And it was me deepening more into the grid and connecting energetically at that level that something really clicked for me. And I believe going forward, especially in 2026 going onwards, is that there's going to be a lot around those codes because of Chiron. We're going into Chiron in Taurus. We are finally ending Chiron in Aries, which is all to do about empowerment, right? We've had 7 years of empowerment. And now we're going to be moving into Chiron in Taurus, which is all to do with like deep core wounding at a collective around a sense of security, around a sense of belonging, around a sense of feeling safe and connection to the planet. But I believe that connection to the planet is not just to Mother Gaia. I believe that connection to the planet is more through the grids, because the grids connect you up to different dimensions, to different star systems. And so it's a much bigger field that you're pulling on through that. Okay then, my lovelies, thank you so much for being here. And in our next session, we are going to be looking at the foundational codes around the Aquarian codes. What are those foundational codes? And I'm going to share with you an archetype that I feel is going to really come to the forefront going forwards, that is around how we manifest. It's like a new way, a different way of manifesting because of these Ascension Aquarian codes that are coming through. Okay, take care. Lots of love.